A railway depot sits silent under a freezing winter sky. The temperature has dropped well below zero. The last freight train returned hours ago, and the station appears deserted. A locomotive engineer finishes his shift, completes the paperwork, and prepares to head home. Logically, the next step seems simple. Turn off the engine, lock the cab, come back tomorrow. That's exactly what you would do with a car. But something strange happens. The locomotive stays running. An hour passes, then another. The giant diesel engine continues burning fuel despite sitting completely motionless. By sunrise, several locomotives across the yard are doing exactly the same thing. At first glance, it looks like an enormous waste of money. But locomotive workers know something most people don't. Sometimes, saving a few hundred liters of fuel can lead to a disaster worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. Today, we'll uncover why diesel locomotives are often left running throughout freezing winter nights and what can happen if someone decides to switch them off. Most people assume locomotives use antifreeze just like cars. Surprisingly, many large diesel locomotives rely on specially treated water-based cooling systems instead. At first, this sounds risky. After all, water freezes. But engineers face a different problem. A locomotive engine contains thousands of horsepower and hundreds of liters of oil circulating under pressure. If certain antifreeze chemicals contaminate the lubrication system, they can react with hot oil and create thick sludge that destroys bearings, blocks oil passages, and causes catastrophic engine failure. For that reason, many locomotive cooling systems use treated water with specialized additives rather than conventional automotive antifreeze. The solution works perfectly until winter arrives, because the moment temperatures plunge below freezing, that water becomes a ticking bomb. Imagine a powerful diesel locomotive stranded in a snowstorm. The engine runs out of fuel. The motor stops. Everything becomes silent. Then the real danger begins. As temperatures fall, water inside the cooling system slowly freezes. Unlike most materials, water expands when it turns into ice. That expansion creates incredible pressure, enough pressure to crack thick steel engine blocks. In the winter of 1977, severe cold struck parts of the United States. Several locomotives became stranded during extreme weather conditions. When fuel supplies ran out and the engine stopped, the cooling water froze inside the engines. The expanding ice shattered critical engine components from within. By morning, multiple locomotives had suffered catastrophic damage. Machines worth hundreds of thousands of dollars were destroyed simply because their engines stopped running. But why not just drain the water before shutting down? Unfortunately, that creates another problem, and it's just as dangerous. A locomotive engine can weigh several tons. During operation, its internal components become extremely hot. The metal expands. Every moving part reaches precise operating tolerances. Now, imagine shutting that engine down in temperatures of -30 or even -40 degrees. The outer metal cools rapidly, while the inner components remain scorching hot. This creates a phenomenon known as thermal shock. The outside contracts, the inside remains expanded. Massive internal stresses develop throughout the engine block. Invisible cracks begin to form. The metal literally tears itself apart. Railway workers have witnessed engines damaged beyond repair because they were cooled too quickly in extreme winter conditions. In some cases, cylinder blocks cracked and internal components warped so severely that complete engine replacement became necessary. Simply draining the cooling system isn't enough. The locomotive must remain warm, and that means keeping the engine running. Even if freezing and thermal shock weren't concerns, shutting down a locomotive introduces another serious danger: the train's braking system. Most freight trains use compressed air brakes. A powerful air compressor continuously supplies pressure throughout the train. As long as the engine runs, the compressor maintains that pressure. When the engine stops, the compressor stops too. At first, nothing happens, but tiny air leaks exist throughout every train. Minute by minute, pressure slowly escapes. Hour by hour, the braking force weakens. Eventually, a parked train can lose enough pressure for the brakes to release. Now imagine a multi-thousand-ton freight train sitting on a slight grade. Without adequate air pressure, gravity begins to take over. The train can start rolling on its own. Once a runaway train gains momentum, stopping it becomes nearly impossible. That is why railroad operators treat compressed air pressure as a matter of life and death. There's another hidden enemy inside every diesel locomotive: engine oil. When a locomotive is operating, hundreds of liters of oil flow through the engine, protecting metal components from friction. But when temperatures plunge far below freezing, that oil begins to thicken. Eventually, it can become almost like tar. After several hours in extreme cold, the lubrication system may no longer circulate properly. Trying to start the engine under those conditions can be disastrous. Without adequate lubrication, bearings overheat within seconds. Metal surfaces grind directly against each other. Critical engine components can seize almost instantly. In some northern regions, frozen locomotives must be heated for hours before they can safely be restarted. The cost and effort involved are enormous, which is why many railroads simply leave the engines running. A locomotive sitting idle can consume hundreds of liters of diesel fuel every day. To outsiders, this seems wasteful, but railroad accountants have done the math. Replacing a cracked engine block can cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. Repairing freeze damage can take weeks. A disabled locomotive can block rail traffic, delay shipments, and disrupt entire supply chains. The financial impact quickly reaches millions of dollars. Suddenly, burning fuel overnight looks like a bargain. Many railway companies learned this lesson the hard way after attempting aggressive fuel-saving programs. The money saved on diesel was often dwarfed by repair costs and operational disruptions. In the railroad industry, reliability almost always wins over fuel savings. Today, some locomotives use automatic start-stop systems controlled by onboard computers. The idea is simple. When the engine cools to a certain temperature, the computer automatically restarts it. In theory, this saves fuel while preventing freeze damage, but technology isn't perfect. Extreme cold affects batteries, sensors, fuel systems, and electronics. If the computer fails to restart the engine, the locomotive can quickly freeze solid. There have been cases where automated systems shut engines down successfully, but failed to start them again during severe winter weather. Within hours, major engine damage occurred. The lesson was clear. Nature doesn't always cooperate with technology. So why don't diesel locomotives shut down in winter? Because freezing water can crack engine blocks, because thermal shock can destroy steel components, because air brakes depend on running compressors, because engine oil can turn into thick sludge, and because the cost of repairing a frozen locomotive is often far greater than the fuel required to keep it running. What looks like waste from the outside is actually one of the most important survival strategies in railroad operations. Sometimes, the cheapest decision is to keep the engine running.